Yeah, really excited to be speaking at Data Weekender. Obviously, it's been going for quite a few years now, and I just think it's a great opportunity for everyone to sort of get together and learn a little bit more about different technologies and things. So I wanted to talk a bit more about data governance. I mean, I think it's a really, really exciting area. And I think a lot of problems that we see and face within industry, it requires us to sort of help businesses grow and get that buy-in from that business level. And we all sort of think about like technology, and yes, we can use this technology to do this, but the biggest problem that we always have is trying to get the CTOs and the CEOs and everyone to get sort of bought into the reason as to why we want to use this technology. And governance is a particularly kind of hard sell, I think, within organizations at that level. So I think it's like kind of quite important to sort of like think about this topic. And I do really think that this can change how we go forwards. And I think it's not that like really old sort of impediment to progress that we've kind of seen in the past. And I think sort of it really, really helps business move forward with this program of work. So the session today, I'm going to be talking a little bit further about that and thinking about a new world of data governance and how we can kind of help businesses understand that benefit and why it's important, and some simple steps to get forward, to move sort of forward as well with that. So a little bit about myself. I'm going to be starting a new role in a couple of weeks now at Cloud Direct. So that's really, really exciting. Doing more data and AI side of things. I'm a founder of Data Toboggan, and we're a Synapse set of conferences. We think about I suppose all aspects of Synapse within that, and we run sort of 3 sort of conferences a year. We run a winter one and Cool Runnings one in the summer, and we've got a really small sort of short session event, Alpine Coast, on the 24th of November, which we run over 3 sort of time zones, and that's on a Friday. Normally we run on Saturday for the 2 sort of big conferences. So as well as it being Synapse, obviously we talk about all the fabric sort of side of things as well, because that's sort of where things are going. But obviously lots of people are still thinking about Synapse on that side of things. And we have a podcast as well called Synapse Chat, so we're just sort of evolving that as well. I'm massively involved with the community, and I help at SQL Bits, and I'm a SQL Bits buddy as well to help people enjoy the conference, not feel so overwhelmed by the events as well, and I help with that one. I've had the privilege to be a Microsoft MVP for 6 years now, and I've spent a lot of time in the past doing a PhD looking at management database systems. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on, because it's a way of thinking about how one sort of goes forward with data governance. So my agenda for today is looking at 5 sort of different areas. What is data governance? Thinking about the elements and the type of issues that exist within that. Thinking about why sort of data governance and those sort of general benefits of data governance, and those sort of benefits related to business, and why it's really, really important to have embedded data governance program. There are many different frameworks out there, and I think it's important to know what frameworks are there, so you can pull the right bits from the right frameworks to help you sort of like go forward with different areas. So I'm going to cover those sort of main frameworks. And I think it's really important to think about how we change and improve our processes. So thinking about changing our sort of world and place within data governance, and thinking about that different way as how we can sort of go forward, how we can increase those business benefits and that sort of innovation side of things, and talk about this new sphere of influences in a framework called the Codex. And then finally, thinking about where Microsoft Purview fits in with that, a little bit about the elements, but how they sort of help drive that data governance through that automation, this new world. So let me start by setting the scene about what data governance is. So the standard definition that you probably will have seen in lots of different places is this one that's given by the data management body of knowledge. And it's that exercise of authority, control and shared decision making, thinking about planning, monitoring and enforcement over the management of data assets. Now, this statement includes sort of many different elements from management control to sort of people involvement. Now, DAMA, if you haven't actually come across that yet, they're this sort of international body that provides that core sort of body of knowledge that helps advance data management profession. Now, it's been around for over 30 years, and it comes in like a really big sort of thick book, and I tend to dip in and dip out of it because there's lots of information about where to find things and general sort of processes sort of within that. I thought it's interesting to sort of look at like Wikipedia, and that provides sort of a slightly different description. And it says like data governance encompasses the people, processes and technology required to create a consistent and proper handling of organisations' data across business enterprise. I think that's a little bit easier to kind of like understand, and that's really where we're going, thinking about how that business enterprise sort of organises data within the whole sort of type of enterprise and that kind of thing. So I think it's that embodiment of managing data efficiently and effectively that helps us gain that trusted benefit and value for data. Now, data governance has two sort of sides, that sort of creation of all those rules and policies to help that management data, and that hands-on sort of managing of data by the data stewards. And Peter Aiken says that they are the implementation arm of data governance and that first line of defence. So I think it's important to think about the people that are actually on the ground doing that work as the data stewards. I mean, they're massively important, and it's not that centralised approach to data governance that we've seen in the past. It does need to be distributed across the entire business. So I thought I'd put together a diagram that shows this sort of complexity of data governance. I started with it being based on that DAMA de Bock body of knowledge and my experience. And in this spray diagram, it illustrates like all those interconnectedness of data governance elements. I mean, I like diagrams because they show that whole sort of central picture of those sort of elements and how to get started with data governance. And as you can see, sort of in that center of this sort of diagram, you've got like data governance, and then it sort of reaches throughout loads and loads of different sort of areas. And you can sort of think that you've got like things like the data catalog, thinking about data discovery, data quality, and you've got things like roles, and there you've got the data stewards that I just briefly mentioned a minute ago. But they're all sort of like interlinked together. But I think often we don't sort of think about the whole picture, and data governance is very much something that needs to be thought about as a whole. And it covers like all sort of like data sources as well, and provides sort of functional requirements for analytics and all those AI projects. So if we're thinking now, there's a lot of talk about generative AI and how that kind of fits in with things, but you can't really move forward with generative AI unless you start thinking about responsible AI, which is part of like data ethics. And then you kind of think that this all sort of feeding back to this one core central sort of core area which needs to move forwards. So I believe that this sort of like new world of data governance, that it needs to be driven by business use cases and accessing or that business value of that data, which helps sort of prioritize those data sources that are being worked on. And I think that if you think just about using like Microsoft Purview as that tool, I mean, it's great and it helps remove those data silos, but it is just part of the picture. So I'm going to talk a bit more about the sort of whole picture throughout the rest of this sort of session as well. We have many data issues within a business. And I think if we don't look to data governance, we won't be able to get those businesses to be competitive or to protect that data significantly. And I think if you start thinking about that strategy and oversight, not having a data strategy or governance operating model, it could result in serious reputational damage for a business, and they even create sort of financial loss if we're not very, very careful. And I think it's important to understand that data enables control of the narrative that can prevent that misinformation. We have technical issues, that fragmented data estate that can result in a business using out-of-date data, affecting those decisions that are made. Not knowing the lineage of the data makes troubleshooting issues really, really hard and can cause more manual effort to actually fix things, as we've kind of seen in our day-to-day roles, really. Then thinking about data and does it need to be classified, or if it isn't classified, I mean, it could result in data breaches that might occur. And we're always thinking about that regulatory compliance that may not be followed. And all of these things can have huge issues if there's a data leak, and competitors can gain access to our data, and more importantly, if it causes harm to a person. And then that lack of data culture in a business, it causes like poor efficiency and can reduce revenue. I mean, the people part of anything to do with data governance is at the sort of core of everything we need to think about, and bringing sort of people with us always. And the final point, I think, is that lack of responsibility of sort of data ownership that affects its usage. Ownership of data, I believe, is crucial to control who has access and sort of define how it's used. So these are just a few examples. There's lots of different examples of the issues that we kind of face within sort of the data side of things. But thinking about how we actually address these, this helps us talk to businesses about data governance. So thinking a little bit more about those sort of business drivers, there are a few recent examples that I've come across. There's loads more than this, and every week you hear, don't you, about some other sort of areas where things have gone wrong. There's been cyber attacks, accessing data. There's actually been data breaches that have been caused by staff that have made errors. Some data breaches, people have been very lucky that they can't actually see the data, or the data's there, but people don't know the data's there, so it hasn't actually been able to be sort of like exfiltrated from the systems. But I think it's like important to sort of think that there's lots of different reasons why data happens. It could be poor coding, but thinking about how we go forward with this and how to combat those sort of areas, and how it might sort of, I suppose, reduce efficiency or missed opportunities. I mean, we still get to that point where there may be those issues that can be helped by if we think about machine learning or generative AI, but there's been a lot of talk recently that we've kind of seen that just not having that good quality data can obviously really affect how even machine learning or generative AI kind of moves sort of forward as well. So, and that's bringing a whole set of different problems than we actually see that are already there with data being breached. So there are many sort of business benefits of data governance, and for any program to work and to be successful, it needs to be grounded by business benefits. Many governance programs have failed in the past, sort of being seen as costly, no business benefits. Important to drive that change in mindset. And technology can help sort of increase benefit. I mean, we see Microsoft Purview can help automate those functions. But on top of that, it's about driving a data culture and making it easy for people to find that data, request access to that data, and use that data. So above all, I think data governance is driving that business transformation. It enables better business decisions and new lines of business to become possible. And then that poor sort of data quality is often seen. So by removing data silos, we can improve that quality of the data to enable better business decisions. So in today's age, there are many regulations that need to be followed. We see such as GDPR, preventing data loss is an absolute must now. And knowing what data you have around the organisation is key. To have one central catalogue that people can use to find that data they want adds that control and uniformity. So adoption of data governance brings with it that sort of culture and a different way of working, and it increases that adoption of data use in the business. And every business needs to have secure data to prevent breaches or misuse of data. So thinking about that ease of use and data in a secure fashion and how we actually protect that really helps. So I think these are all issues and areas where you can talk to business side of things to help drive why governance is important, but it's really that those business sort of use cases. And then from our point of view, we start thinking about like the technical benefits of data governance, thinking about why do we need it and how can technology help us, I suppose. See that those overarching aims, thinking about creating that trusted data and whether the data is of that good quality and secure, and it needs to be good quality going forwards as it's used for so many different things now. Then data governance should be seen as that critical progress. It's not an impediment to progress. And I think that's the really big question we have to, or point that we really need to, I suppose, get over to business, that it enables enterprises to have that self-service and analytics, and it drives that real-time decisions. So data is everywhere, and it's difficult to know what data sort of a business has. So sort of gaining visibility to assets across that entire data estate is absolutely key. Making it easy to find those assets and open to all in the enterprise helps sort of improve that culture. It's important to know that the quality of the data and the analytics that are based on are for the right business decisions, and that enables those decisions to move forward to help that business sort of grow. I mean, I think like a lot of businesses, they think that they've got this set of data, we need to put all of this data into whatever we're doing, we're scanning these things, but it's sort of this minefield of all this data that doesn't actually have maybe business value sat behind that. So just thinking about tying it down to smaller pieces and tackling it in sort of smaller areas makes business think about adopting it in a much better sort of fashion, I've found. And then sort of for compliance, it's especially important to meet those regulatory standards, as we all know, those risks as well. And then managing that sensitive data across those multiple clouds and apps, and thinking about those endpoints and that business-wide picture. Now, being able to know sort of the impact of that data change as well does help prevent issues occurring. So technology can help us sort of move forward with that. And this sort of empowers an organisation to govern, protect and sort of manage data in a new sort of comprehensive ways. And I think it's really important to note that every business is different. And a business will have many different entry points to data governance. So you can't sort of say, oh, well, we all need to have a data steward, or we all need to add these particular data sources into a system, because it might be that they already have data stewards and they're only looking at one particular point of view. Or you might have another business where they have absolutely nothing. So you have to start with like having assigning stewards and data owners. So you've got that sort of case going forwards. So data governance can help businesses climb to those sort of new heights. And I think just like taking a sort of cable car sort of can aid ascent to reach that summit, bolstering people's sort of side of governance with an embedded technology solution that can help business. So that multifaceted data we see can benefit from a similar treatment. I mean, data governance thrives bringing order from chaos. And data is everywhere. It is that enabler that reduces data risk, and it drives success for businesses. And it provides tools and enables innovation. I mean, Wikipedia talks about innovation as that practical implementation of ideas that result in that introduction of new goods and services, or improvement in offering goods and services. But in the words of Ladley, good governance is that process in part that has that enforcement component, and it's a disciplined formal process to manage data. And to that end, I think starting from a strong base using current frameworks can help. So I want to talk in brief a little bit about these frameworks that I refer to sort of my day-to-day role. So this is the DAMA wheel, and it's one of those main frameworks for data management. It was created in about the 1980s, and it's that guide. It's a definitive introduction to that data management side of things. And it defines that industry standard view of data management functions, its terminology and its best practice. But it doesn't detail those specific sort of methods and techniques. I mean, the DAMA DBOC is not a complete authority on any specific topic, but it does have a lot of places to go to find information, and has widely sort of recognised publications and articles that have all been sort of like incorporated within that as well. So it has these sort of 11 sort of functional areas for data management, which are depicted in what they call this DAMA wheel. And I always think we sort of think about getting started. I always think about different areas where this interacts with, thinking about that data governance, and then start thinking about that metadata management. So if you think of that, you're starting to think about, well, people, and then you're thinking about Microsoft Purview. And then obviously going into you would drive into reference and data management, master data sort of management side of things. But I think sort of maybe data quality and that reference data are the main sort of areas that one would start with, rather than going, because not every business needs sort of master data management. But as I say, no business is the same, and it really depends on where you are at that starting point. So over the years, that DAMA wheel's kind of evolved, and it's highlights different perspectives from the original one. This is a 2017 sort of version on. and it's depicted by sort of core activities for that data governance, sort of surrounded by those sort of life cycle activities, and it contains structures of governance within that. So you can kind of see you've got policies, you've got that stewardship and ownership that I was talking about, and then thinking about things like principle ethics, which obviously is massively important if we're thinking about how we're all going to want to move to generative AI, and with that big sort of like push there at the moment. And then think about data classification, and then a part of that you can see is like data strategy. And I think that it's a way of going, a place where you kind of start, but that sort of drives this whole sort of process forward. So you can see that this helps sort of professionals sort of like manage sort of data effectively and efficiently by thinking about where to start and where to move forward. So this is another framework, the Cloud Data Management Capabilities Framework. Now, this was only launched in 2021, and it defines those best practices and capabilities necessary to manage and control the data in cloud environments. I mean, this framework, it represents that important milestone in the global adoption of industry best practice for data management. It helps sort of bring all that trust and confidence and sort of dependability for that adoption of cloud technologies. And as you can see, it has this ecosystem of like 14 different areas. And this has been embedded into Microsoft Azure since September 21. And you can see there's templates and things within that you can actually use to help you manage your capabilities. And it covers like core things. It's got that cataloging that we talk about in Purview, your classification side of things, and how you protect and impact, thinking about that metrics for data quality measurement, and really important areas when you start thinking about data lineage. Where's that data come from? Obviously, it doesn't sort of go into data provenance, but there's lots of different areas here that are absolutely key, and like that data ownership that I've spoke about. So it's a really good framework to understand and utilize within sort of the Microsoft cloud area. There's lots of large corporations are already using this. So. And then from the same place, that EDM Council, thinking about frameworks that help you sort of like benchmark your organization now. I mean, there's a few, and obviously this is one of them, and it's that data management capability assessment. So it looks at like 7 or 8 different sort of areas and how this sort of like builds up that data management program, because we always need to know where we are, because if we don't know where we are, we can't help organizations see where we're going, and then you can't say, well, we were here but now we're here. So I think it's always important to have some kind of like benchmarking or framework sort of process, because then you can go back and say, well, yes, this is what we've done, because that's a big problem with data management. You can't, and data, well, the data governance side of those kind of things, really, because you can't actually tell business what benefits you've made, and showing that business benefit. This is just one technique to help with that. It makes our lives all better when we're thinking about data management and how we move sort of forward with that. This is a really well-known model which has been around for a long time from the CMMI Institute. Now, it covers best practice for providing support for the implementation of process in 5 categories. It covers that strategy, governance, data quality, operations, and platform architecture. Now, the model has that data management process area with sort of those different categories for supporting process. So, for example, if you look at the data governance one, it includes that governance management, a business glossary, thinking about that metadata management side. Now, these process areas serve as principal means to communicate the themes, the goals and practices. And then those accomplishments of process areas, practices, they kind of allow an organisation to sort of build capabilities. And that infrastructure support practices help you accomplish that maturity in data management. Now, they have those 5 sort of capabilities in that maturity level of definitions. And it goes from, like that level 1 performed, thinking about whether it's managed, defined, and it sort of moves through different levels. So you can see how the business is sort of progressing. And I think sort of you can use this, or you can use other maturity models. I mean, Gartner has a maturity model as well. And then if you've looked at the Microsoft Purview white paper, they've got a maturity model that's got 4 sort of levels, and it goes from governed to ungoverned. And it's sort of you can use to map all your different areas against that, and then produce some kind of like analytics and things to help sort of show where you are and where you need to go going forwards. But the next question I kind of start thinking about, so you have all these frameworks in your pocket, and where do you kind of go with those? I mean, it's difficult if you don't know a lot about the frameworks, and it can be quite overwhelming, I think. And I came across this article that Data Crossroads wrote, which compares sort of 3 frameworks: that Dama-DeBock 2 framework, the DCAM 2 one that we've covered, and it also covers TOGAF, which I haven't included there, but that's the Open Group Architecture Framework for Enterprise Architecture. And this sort of review, I like this because it's it can shows you sort of clearly where different sort of elements sort of sit. And their findings from the article after the review really was that the Dama-DeBock by Dama is and that EDMC Council one are the most used industry reference guides. And then a significant number of companies either adjust or develop models of their own. So I think if you think about the Dama and the DCAM one, they differ in sort of those few ways. So you can see like the number of building blocks are slightly different, the nature in their business blocks, and sort of the content of those business blocks. Like not everyone, if you look, Dama talks about data ethics, but the DCAM doesn't. And TOGAF covers different areas like business architecture and things. So there's lots of different areas that all sort of fit together. So it's important to sort of pull which bits you want from the models. So rather than say, well, I'm just going to align to the Dama, which is good, but you can be more connected to your business by saying, well, we want to use this part from this model, and then we use a little bit of the EDMC Council models within the cloud, and so it all sort of starts to fit together. I mean, obviously, like the Gartner ones, there's other like frameworks as well that I've come across, like some of like the I think, was it Stanford, I think, and one of the other universities have got some great sort of like models and things you can follow as well, which helps you sort of like move forward and delve more into this kind of framework side. So I wanted to talk then a little bit more about this sort of changing pace of data governance and how it sort of changes our world. And I think sort of one way is through thinking about enabling business knowledge sort of gained from learning about sort of business data. And this knowledge is often held by a few, but moving to a model of sharing details about the data and how it can help your business flourish. I believe tools like Purview help, as I've mentioned earlier, But you can also use things like a data map and data catalog within that. But knowing your data, removing those silos, helps increase that quality of the data, and that is absolutely imperative for us moving forward with any sort of AI technologies. So knowing what data your business has, what it's good for, and its potential future uses requires looking globally or holistically across the business. I mean, this can be achieved by having a systems mindset. I'm going to explain that a little bit in the next slide. Or using like a lodestar called the Codex, and how that can help guide data governance and manage with a systems mindset, and sort of change our world, enabling innovation based on known sort of data outcomes that can be trusted. I'm going to explain what the Codex is in a minute as well. But we'll just talk a bit about systems mindset. This has been evolving since the 1950s, and systems thinking is that it's an epistemology that applies to human activity. Now, it's based on 4 basic ideas: emergence, hierarchy, communication, and control. Now, these are characteristics of a system. And there's been many theorists, such as Ackoff, Chekland, Seng, who have looked at how to address that real-world complexity in organisations. So systems thinking is a way of making sense of complexity of the world, and by looking at it in terms of wholes and relationships, rather than splitting it down into sort of parts. Now, it's been used as a way of exploring and developing effective actions in complex sort of contexts. Now, sort of managing data is such an area of complexity that has many interconnections. So what does systems thinking and this way of the systems, and how does that kind of like help, I suppose, going forward? Well, this sort of system does something, and the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And thinking about a hierarchy of entities which are wholes, and then becoming something bigger. So if you think about all the different parts of data management and all the data ethics and data governance, that creates something for the business. And it's only having all of these bits, it creates something much bigger. So systems thinking is like thinking about the parts, but when they're all put together, you get something that is much bigger. And it's that worldview, that sort of set of perceptions. And then thinking about how people's attitudes and beliefs and values. I mean, this is a lot of like the culture side of things that we kind of think about, and how this all sort of like is sort of interconnected. And we think about moving from a linear view to those feedback loops, and that's thinking of that like that agile sort of technology, I suppose, going forwards. And it's just being able to sort of not think in silos and think about emerging into something new. It's moving from that analytics to synthesis. So an emergence is sort of like an outcome of the synergies of all of these parts sort of coming together. So drawing systems sort of thinking together with sort of database systems. This is the Codex, which was created as part of my PhD research into my sort of database systems, and how to sort of improve and understand complexities that we face on that day-to-day basis. And it's kind of a socio-technical approach using systems thinking to understand what the influences are for successful management of data and database systems. So I don't know whether the sound will play on this, but we'll kind of see.
Yeah, we're not getting the sound.
You're not getting it?
Oh. Oh, Windows 11.
Probably should have shared the sounds with when I shared the presentation, maybe. But it's just the music on the background, so
Okay.
It's not got any talking on it. So but it's useful to know that because it's embedded in the presentation. So thank you. Right. Thinking about the outcomes from my research and how that sort of fitted in, this is how I think about managing data after I carried out the research. And you can kind of see that you start thinking about interactions and how managing data and data governance, how it sort of all fits together. And there are so many different areas that all interact with each other. It's kind of just that mess of a minefield to incorporate everything. So people that are working in data, we work in lots of different areas, but it's having that holistic approach, thinking about all these different things. So the codex that came out from my research was thinking about this sort of different area of database management. And the codex was this analogy based on the sort of revolutionary introduction of codex in the 1st century. And that sort of changed the storage medium from a roll to a codex, which is like a book format. And this brought challenges migrating data, but significant benefits of increasing speed of data access and that references and durability of parchment. So not all text, as we know, were migrated from sort of rolls to a codex, that's that book format, and lots of things became sort of defunct of that. Some of the text cases were changed from capitals to lowercase, and a lot of manuscripts have not survived. And I think that will probably happen even as we're moving into this digital sort of age. But this scholarly activity led to this revival of reading sort of classic documents and the development of this sort of like centre of culture. Now, these 5 areas of codex are sort of that high level categorization of findings. So thinking about control and how this sort of thinks about those business people, thinking about communication, governance, thinking about that quality of that data and that culture. And these are just all elements of how they map into this sort of framework. But it's a framework to help you think about the main sort of areas that you need to consider when you're moving forward. I mean, thinking about control as well, you might think on the business side, well, like things like we need to have like data ownership and data stewardship need to be considered right at that beginning side. We have the operational side, thinking about how we manage the data, that cloud, technical and security side. And then you can think about data lineage for root cause here and sort of thinking about that orchestration for automation. So there's lots of different areas that you consider within that sort of side of areas. And then data is, as we know, the heart of everything that we do. So thinking about its storage, the type of data, its visualization, that governance, availability, understanding your current state, which is sort of core to sort of improvements and innovation. Then utilizing that sort of data catalog helps you know what your current state is, and having that initial sort of data maturity assessment helps plan for improvements. So if we think about that data catalog, we need to think about its management, who's going to manage those individual elements, how's that catalog going to gain that business value, and how we think about those best practices and how that changes sort of requirements. Then expediently think about areas for understanding the design, agile patterns, what knowledge and learning and skills are we going to need for this, architecture blueprints. And explicitly, I suppose we can think about things like a business glossary, because that helps with knowledge, what policies and things that we might want to address. And finally, thinking about unpredictable events. Changes are areas which I suppose it continues all the time. We can never get away from change. If you think you've just got everything sorted out, then technology changes and even business changes, and change is coming much faster now than it ever used to. And designing those best practices and requirements and having that kind of technology, it's a core area that we need to consider embed in any of our processes that we're going forward. So I think tools like Purview's Lineage can sort of help with that change aspect and maybe using it for impact analysis, but there's a lot more to think about than just the core technological side. So the Codex is this agile approach to decipher complexity of interconnections, and it has this potential to create an autonomous way to deliver best practice. It's a way of thinking about continuously changing best practice while acknowledging all those environmental costs and differing business sort of team priorities. So if you think back to that spray diagram that I introduced earlier, these are sort of like the core sort of headline areas. And to consider that no business is the same and the maturity sort of varies and no business starts in that same place. I mean, there is this overall aim to improve data quality from those analytics and advanced analytics. And but for each of those sort of 5 areas of the Codex framework and a systems mindset, you need to apply that to drive forward with that interconnected data culture of data governance. And think of this sort of framework of elements. And getting that business buy-in, as I said, is quite hard, as we've probably all sort of seen, and trying to get any sort of financials assigned to that is quite a hard task. So a few sort of core areas that can help you get started right at that beginning is thinking about that business leadership, thinking about carrying out that data maturity assessment. We can think about like defining use cases, creating that value versus effort assessment, and having that a holistic sort of thinking with that sort of Codex side of things. We need to think about frameworks, but then we also need to think about how we assign sort of data stewards and data owners against those, and even sort of creating and defining business glossaries and thinking about those sort of actionable use cases and defining sort of that data catalog will help us. And I think automation through sort of Purview, but it helps with that data catalog and sort of a business glossary side of things. So I want to talk a little bit about Purview and how that sort of fits into this whole sort of area, really. And it's a part of, I suppose, that Microsoft Intelligent Data Platform, which we think about for those operational databases, Synapse, Fabric, and Microsoft Purview. And it's kind of like quite a complex little space now to enable us to drive sort of like that innovation with the governance side of things, because not only do we have like that Purview governance portal side of things, we also have that Purview compliance portal, and they're two separate sort of portals that have all the different areas. But then there is now a new portal as well, which combines areas from both of the compliance portal and the governance portal. And I think all of those will be merged into the new Purview portal at some point. And then, well, obviously, with the introduction of Microsoft Fabric as well, we've got this Purview Hub, which is access sort of for Fabric and access sort of for those sort of Fabric administrators and things like that. So you've got different elements. The Purview Hub doesn't have everything. It's in preview at the moment still, and it's just sort of, I think you can get confused where to enter, what belongs to what, and with 4 different sort of entry points with accessing different things. I think at the moment it's just a little bit complicated with the 4 different sides, but hopefully it'll become a little more simpler when we've got go down to like 2 portals from 4, and I think there will be 2 portals. That new sort of Purview portal it does enable you to sort of get started quickly with business users. It's really quick, and you can just log straight onto that purview.microsoft.com, and it's that free sort of Purview hub. You've got a data catalog, you can see your data owners, you've got data sharing features within that. But as we've been seeing with kind of lots of setups and things, it doesn't support multi-tenancy at the moment, so I don't know whether that's something that will happen, but just having one portal for different things is quite challenging in some respects if we've got dev and test environments and things. And then the Purview governance portal, which links into thinking about globally. We've got areas with the catalogue and the data estates insights. That's giving you that much more oversight of where we're going forward. And it's becoming more and more part that it's always there. We've got things like that data map that enable you to sort of see that whole set of information that you have, that scanning, classification, labeling, thinking about that meta model, how that sort of fits in with the business things. And I think that just having this data map without the people side of things, I think is quite hard. And I think we've then got this like data catalog that lots of people have been talking about over the last sort of year and a half, and it's great. Yes, we've got this great catalog. It's got our business glossary, it's got our templates, it's can give us our lineage and things like that, but that needs to be applied back to, we've got a business use case, we've got this data catalog, and the two will help us drive to our end goal. And then obviously you can see more sort of reports. And then thinking about those sort of data policies, things are still coming with that. And data policies feed all the way back to, if you start thinking about that, maybe that DAMA DeBot framework that we had at the beginning, what policies do we need? Why do we need them? How does that all fit together with the business? And what workflows do we kind of want going forwards? And then data sharing, I did check this morning, and it's still in preview. I presume it will come out of preview fairly soon. It's been preview for quite a long time now. And that helps with, I suppose, like across the business, how people can kind of see the data and use that data. But then that then helps with that culture, which then starts making you think about that whole sort of culture. It's helping drive sort of that data literacy within the business. And then thinking about this whole sort of picture of Microsoft Purview, we've got all these different sort of elements now. We've got that risk and compliance, as I said, and that unified data governance. But you can kind of see like all those different areas that we've got underneath now that sit between the two different sort of portals, and how that sort of makes up that whole picture. So we've got that complexity on the people side, and we've also got all the complexity being addressed by some of these technological tools. And then we have all that people side of things within the business and getting the business to adopt that. So it's useful to know how to position each of these different elements. And then within things, even like if you think about that Microsoft Purview Hub, which is that the very new side of things for the Fabric, not everything exists in that at the moment. Some of these elements are still in preview, and obviously they'll come over time, but you just don't have that holistic picture. So there are things that need to be considered about that in your when you're sort of planning for the business as to how you think about governing all of that. And then yeah, there's this I suppose it's that product portfolio again. I suppose just thinking about how everything sort of fits together. And there was a webinar I watched, I don't know if it's still available, but it's probably about 6 months ago now, which is thinking about that data protection and how that sort of fits into site, because we're thinking about Purview as that a holistic sort of view now, thinking about risk and compliance and governance and how all these different areas sort of fit together and to manage that risk and things. So that you've got the data landscape, thinking about protecting your sensitive data, obviously how that risk is managed against the business and how you protect sort of that data, prevent data loss, and governing those sort of data life cycles. And then just thinking about that from a different viewpoint, if you then sort of think as that defense in depth sort of area, I suppose Microsoft Purview really sits in the center. But just from that, if you're thinking of just from that security standpoint, you have all of these different elements that sit within around that, really, that helps enable threat, access management, network and security. They sort of are all sort of connected with these things. So you can see like everything's sort of connected across all of the things, and it's about having that holistic sort of view with those. So in summary, I've discussed sort of, I suppose, like data governance, its interconnections and influences, and data issues for business, and sort of shown why it's important to have data governance. I mean, it's an enabler. Discussed sort of the current frameworks to draw upon, and then looked upon that sort of new sphere of influences and using a systems mindset for the codex and how we sort of think holistically about everything that we think about managing under that data governance sort of classification. And then introduced Purview just to see how those few elements are part of the picture. And then just sort of thinking, well, going forward for that roadmap, start thinking about a maturity assessment going forward, start thinking about having that business sort of mindset, systems thinking on elements, and then look into sort of frameworks and Microsoft Purview to gain sort of business benefit. And sort of every business is different. So it's really, really important to tie whatever you're doing to what your business needs are, because there isn't one size that fits all. And I think above all, it's imperative to get that business buy-in to be successful, and use the best frameworks that are required in this area, and think holistically about that situation, sort of using the codex. And I'll just leave you with this sort of data governance story. So thank you very much for attending my session.